Hello, my name is Dominic Frisby, and today we look at the 10 largest slaving civilizations in history. Who enslaved the most people? Was it the terrifying Mongols, led by, among others, Genghis Khan, who, over the course of their conquests in the 13th and 14th centuries, enslaved some 6.5 million? Was it the British, who notoriously bought some 3.4 million slaves from West African traders and shipped them to plantations in the Americas in the 167 years between 1640 and 1807? Or was it China's Ming Dynasty, perhaps, which lasted some 276 years with a total cumulative population of 1.9 billion, of whom as many as 5% were enslaved, meaning a potential total of roughly 95 million slaves? The answers will surprise you. But first, we need to define what a slave is, and this is the definition we have used. A slave has no ownership of their own body or labour, but is the property of another. A slave can be bought and sold and must work and act according to their owner's compulsion, with little to no legal protection or path to freedom. Thus, serfs, bonded and indentured servants do not quite count as slaves, even if their lot was little better and often worse. If we had included serfs, Russia, for example, would have featured in the top 10. To calculate the number of slaves, we've estimated the total cumulative population over the course of the civilization and multiplied it by the slave to free citizen ratio. For example, ancient Athens, which ran from 500 to 300 BC, had a total cumulative population of 2.25 million, and roughly 1 in 3 were slaves. So the total number of slaves was 33% of 2.25 million, 742,500. So here are the 10 largest slaving civilizations in history. And in equal tenth, it is Abyssinia. The Ethiopian Empire ran for 700 years, from 1270 to 1974. It had a cumulative total population of 207 million, of which in the early years 10% were slaves, though the number fell to 2 to 4% in later years, according to Haile Selassie's slavery advisor, meaning 9 to 10 million people enslaved. In tenth equal, it's the Umayyad Caliphate. In barely 100 years, between 661 and 750, this Islamic empire enslaved some 10 million across North Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Middle East. In ninth place, it's China's Qing Dynasty. This one hinges on your definition of slavery, because there were many in bonded and other forms of servitude, but not slaves as we have defined them. A total population of 2.5 billion, of which maybe 0.5% were slaves, 12.6 million total. You could quite easily argue that 3 to 5% were slaves, meaning a figure 6 times higher of 75 to 125 million. In eighth place, it is ancient Egypt. From 3000 to 30 BC, this empire had a long duration and a cumulative population of 264 million, of whom roughly 5% were slaves, meaning a total of 13 million. In seventh, it's the Third Reich. In just 12 years, the Nazis managed to enslave as many as 26 million people, mostly abducted from Central and Eastern Europe, the fastest enslavement rate of any civilization ever. In equal sixth is the long-lived Joseon Dynasty of Korea, which ran from 1392 to 1897 and saw an estimated 28 million enslaved. Also in sixth, the Byzantines, though they called themselves Romans. With its capital in Constantinople, today Istanbul, this Christian civilization had a total population of 400 million, of whom 7% were slaves, totaling 28 million. In fifth, it's the Sultanate of Delhi. This Islamic kingdom ran from 1206 to 1526, with 446 million people, of which 8% were slaves, meaning a grand total of 36 million enslaved. In fourth place, it's another Islamic state, the Mughal Empire, which ran from 1214 to 1610. This West African civilization saw roughly 1/3 of its population enslaved, by far and away the highest slave rate of any of the empires mentioned. And it created much of West Africa's colossal slave trading infrastructure, the trade routes, the markets, and more, which would later sell to European buyers. With a total cumulative population of 170 million, its slave population was 57 million.
In third, it's another Islamic state, the Abbasid Caliphate, which controlled the Middle East and much of North Africa from 750 to 1258. A cumulative population of 635 million, of which roughly 10% were slaves, means a total of 63 million enslaved.
In second, and just missing out on the top spot, it's yet another Islamic dynasty, the Mughal Empire, which ruled most of northern India from the early 16th to the mid-18th century. With a total population of 1.4 billion, of whom 8% were slaves, the total number is 112 million enslaved. And, in first place, it is the Roman Empire. Running from 27 BC to 395 AD, with a total cumulative population of just over a billion, of which 10 to 20% were slaves, that means a total number of some 160 million slaves. Of any civilization in history, the Romans enslaved the most people. No place for the British on this list, which might be surprising to some as the British slave trade is so well known, largely because the British kept more scrupulous records than anyone else. Also worth noting is that in 1807 the British were the first major power in history to abolish slavery, and more importantly, enforce that abolition. In fact, Romans and Nazis aside, no place for any of the European nations, not even the Portuguese, nor for the US. This is not something that gets emphasized in Western school curricula. Nor is there any place for the Ottomans, which might surprise some, as Romans aside, the Islamic Ottomans were probably the greatest slave traders in history. The Ottomans stole enormous numbers of people into slavery from Africa, the Mediterranean, and Eastern Europe, Poland, Ukraine, and Russia. In fact, the word slave derives from Slav. As many as 10 million passed through their markets.
But because the Ottomans, like the Abbasids before them, castrated many of their slaves, slaves could not breed in the way that they could in, say, the Americas, so their numbers did not multiply generation after generation, and any legacy was largely wiped out, meaning the Ottomans don't make the top 10.
Remember that slavery is as old as human civilization, if not older, and it still goes on. There are thought to be as many as 50 million people living slave-like existences today, mostly in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Which underscores how remarkable the 19th century British abolition movement was. And if you want to read the research in full, it's linked to below. Thank you very much for watching. Please share this video with a friend. Until next time, goodbye.